Welcome, welcome to another exciting episode of Carving the Divine TV. My name is Yujiro Seki. I'm a director, writer, and the producer of the documentary Carving the Divine. Carving the Divine is about the Buddhist sculptors of Japan, and I'm ready to present it for the first time in the world. But before I do so, I thought it would be a great idea to introduce basic concept of Buddhism and the history of Buddhism, so that when you guys finally watch my documentary, you guys can watch it at the maximum value. Today is another day, exciting day, and today we're gonna talk about the Bosatsu. In English, it's a Bodhisattva. It's another category of Buddhist statues. But it's so confusing. The word is so confusing and it's frustrating. So we need to have a specialist to talk about this subject so that we can understand and enjoy Butsuzo even more. Without further ado, I would love to introduce our scholar, the man that I respect the most in the world. Maybe it was too much, but you know what I mean. Mr. Mark Schumacher, welcome.
Well, glad to be back.
Beautiful. I know you must be very tired to do this by now, but just in case for the people who don't know anything about you, so please introduce yourself.
Well, I'm a long-time resident of Kamakura, Japan, over 27 years. And during that time, I fell in love with the Buddhist statuary at the 120 temples and shrines here, and in Kyoto and in Nara. And for 25 years now, I've been going all around Japan looking at temple statuary and cataloging it in a website. And luckily, my website has brought attention to many different peoples, art historians, art collectors, museum curators, scholars of pre-modern Japan. So not only did I get to meet all these old statues, but I got to meet a whole group of new living people interested in the same topic.
Wonderful. Of course, I'm one of them. And, your research is so important for us. So, but today, we're going to talk about the Bosatsu. We're going to talk about Bodhisattva. Again, so confusing. We have a Kannon Bodhisattva. We have a Jizo Bosatsu, Miroku Bosatsu. What is Bosatsu? Please tell us.
Okay, well, I'm going to switch over to my screen. And hopefully you're seeing my screen now. And the Bodhisattva are the second highest class or category of deities. At the very top, up here, we had the Buddha, who we talked about in our last presentation. Bodhisattva are people who have practiced Buddhism and have attained the second highest level, but they delay their entry to Buddhahood to stay behind here on earth to help all living beings reach salvation. And in a sense that, as we said, the word Buddha itself is a Sanskrit term that meant awakened, enlightened, liberated. The term Bodhisattva literally means, the term sattva means a being, as in a human being, and the Bodhi means enlightenment. So the term itself means someone who is destined to reach enlightenment. And we know the Bodhisattva will become Buddhist, but for a time, they stay here with us. Now, what's really interesting is that the Buddha, who we talked about in the last presentation, they have the lump of knowledge, the third eye, the elongated ears, the simple gowns, special hand gestures. The Bodhisattva are portrayed differently from the Buddha. And so this helps you to identify the statues as you go to temple to temple. The Bodhisattva, as we will show here, the Bodhisattva, here's the Bodhisattva, here's the Buddha class. Bump of knowledge, third eye, elongated ears, simple gowns. Now look at this Bodhisattva. Here, the Bodhisattva is, if we compare the Buddha to the Bodhisattva, they both have peaceful faces. They also both have elongated ears, but then everything changes. The Bodhisattva get princely clothes, they get crowns, they get necklaces, they get bracelets, they get jewelry, they get ornamentation. And so this is a very simple rule for identifying the category of the gods or goddesses that you're viewing, right?
I have a question here.
Yes. Yeah.
Why is Bodhisattva has a more ornaments? Is Bodhisattva more fashionable or something?
Now that's a good question. Essentially, the historical Buddha originally was a prince. He had a summer palace, a winter palace. I think he had 3 palaces, dry season palace. And he ultimately, as the story, the legend goes, as a prince living in wealth, one day he went out and he saw an old man. And the next day he went out and he saw a sick man. And the next day he went out and he saw a corpse, a dead body. And he said life is suffering. And from this grew his desire to understand the world. And so he left the palace. So before the historical Buddha became a Buddha, he was called a Bodhisattva. And that's why the princely gowns and the princely clothes. Because he came from the royal class, the nobility. That's at least one of the stories that I've heard for the ornaments and the decorations for the Bodhisattvas. Because we know these Bodhisattvas will surely become Buddhas. We know that the historical Buddha was once a man, a prince, who gave up his nobility, who gave up his royalty to search for truth. So that maybe is one answer. There might be others, I don't know.
Interesting.
Okay?
Yes.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about the Bodhisattva class, the second highest tier. And in Japan, there are 7 Bodhisattva who are the most popular. And we're going to talk about them a little bit, and then I'm going to focus on just 2 of them. And so here we can see the Kannon Bodhisattva, the goddess, originally male, now considered female, the goddess of mercy, the god of mercy. She, I'm going to use the term she instead of he for the goddess of mercy, typically appears with 11 heads and sometimes with 1,000 arms. And this particular deity, Kannon in Japan, Guanyin in China, is perhaps the most widely beloved Buddhist deity in all of East Asia, Korea, Japan, and China. Next to Kannon is this particular deity, Jizo Bosatsu. And Jizo is the only one of the Bodhisattva who is not adorned. He doesn't appear in princely gowns, necklaces, bracelets, and beautiful ornaments. Jizo is almost always portrayed bald and holds a 6-ring staff and holds a wish-granting jewel. Jizo, I should go back. Kannon Bosatsu, the goddess of mercy, is considered a savior of people who are alive today, whereas Jizo Bosatsu is mostly considered our defense attorney in hell. He protects us down in the underworld. And you will see statues. We're going to do this today. These are the two I'm going to focus on. Among the other very popular deities are Monju Bosatsu, Monju Bodhisattva, who you can normally identify because he sits atop a lion, a mythological lion called a shishi. And the fourth one here with the elephant, sitting atop the elephant, is Fugen Bodhisattva. Now, these two are closely related to the historical Buddha. And you will often see the historical Buddha statue in the middle, surrounded by Monju on his lion and Fugen on his elephant. They each represent different aspects of enlightenment. Next, one of the fifth one here is Kokuzo. He's really important to Japan's esoteric schools, the Shingon school. And actually, if I do that, I should. Kannon Bosatsu is basically important to all the schools. Jizo Bosatsu is also important to all the schools. Fugen and Monju are especially important to the Zen schools that revere the historical Buddha. Kokuzo Bosatsu is especially important to the Shingon school, the esoteric schools. He symbolized the vast and boundless Buddha wisdom. And, people pray to him. They pray to him today in modern times to improve their memory, technical skills, and artistic talents. And each of these, in fact, are prayed to for specific purposes. But all of them represent the same goal, the same achievement, the same progression to Buddhahood. And then finally, we have one here called Miroku Bosatsu, who was a Bodhisattva at one time and is destined to become the Buddha of the future. And these six, I can only...
I will interrupt you again because last time we saw Miroku Nyorai, and now we are seeing Miroku Bosatsu. So we are very confused. So
am I. So Miroku Bodhisattva essentially did, in fact, leave the earth and went to live in the Buddha paradise, and will come back as the future Buddha. But in the time that Miroku is gone, Jizo Bosatsu is the representative. So Jizo and Miroku are very closely associated. Jizo now stays in the world to help us. Miroku is basically retired and will come back in the future as a Buddha. It's hard to explain without going into really thick scriptural descriptions.
Very interesting, very interesting.
So, and I could not fit, on this page, I couldn't fit Seishi Bosatsu. Bosatsu is the Japanese word for Bodhisattva. But Seishi and Kannon are two of the key attendants or helpers of the Amida Buddha, who we learned about in the last presentation. And we'll learn a little bit more about him today too. Okay, I would be remiss if I didn't say one thing about history. There are three main schools of Buddhism. The original school of Buddhism, the Theravada school, was monastic. You gave up marriage, you gave up having children, and you lived in a monastery, and you practiced all the time to reach enlightenment. That was the Theravada school. The Mahayana school was the school that said anybody can reach enlightenment if they practice correctly. So you can be married, you can eat meat, you can do any number of things. You don't have to give up your earthly life to try to achieve Buddha. Now, in the Theravada tradition, we have the deities called arhats. And they are very, very similar to the Bodhisattva. If we go to our screen, remember the 4 enlightened realms, and then the 6 states of suffering, the 6 states of karmic rebirth. Up here, you will see right there, we have the arhats and the arhats. And then we have the Bodhisattva and then the Buddha. So here we have both the Theravada tradition and the Mahayana tradition involved. But I just wanted to, it's a confusing, maybe confusing to the viewers, but if I talk about Bodhisattva, we have to recognize that it's part of the Mahayana school, not the Theravada school. The Theravada school is a monastic school. Aesthetics, you give up worldly life and you live like in a convent or a nunnery or in a monastery. So I want to throw that in there. These particular deities, the arhats, you can find examples of them throughout Japan. But Japan's basic Buddhist traditions are from the Mahayana school and not the Theravada school. But I mentioned there are 3 basic. There's also the esoteric school, the tantric school, the Shingon and the Tendai. And those we will talk about a little bit more here today. So I just wanted to throw that in there because otherwise I would be unfair.
So arhats are basically from a Theravada tradition, but
right.
we have statues in Japan and
yes,
side by side with the Mahayana statues or something like that. Or?
Yes. Wow. And so, interestingly, in the original artwork that survives, the historical Buddha was said to have 10 disciples, and then he was said to have 16 disciples, and then that number went up to 500 disciples. Here we're seeing an example of the 500 students of the historical Buddha. The arhats were the original disciples. Like, Jesus Christ had 12 disciples. Well, the historical Buddha had his 10, then it was raised to 16, and then in artistic representations, we often get the 500. And they all have very curious faces. Every one of them has a different facial expression. And I have not studied the arhats. I have not really studied them. But I did feel remiss if I didn't mention them. Although they're not huge in Japan, you can find them in Japan. This is in Chiba, 20 minutes from my house. So today, of the Buddhas the Bodhisattvas, the Bosatsu, that I want to discuss today, we're going to focus on just 2 of them. And they are 2 of the most beloved. Now, if you think understanding the Buddhas with their simple lump of knowledge, third eye, elongated ears, simple gowns is easy, it gets really confusing at the Bodhisattva level. Jizo himself, I have cataloged on my own webpage over 100 forms of Jizo in Japan. There's a Jizo that protects people in all 6 realms of karmic rebirth. There's the Jizo who protects aborted children, miscarried children, stillborn children. There's a Jizo who goes to hell and temporarily stops the purgatorial fires from burning so that people in hell don't have to put up with the fires for a little bit of time. So there's a whole bunch of different kinds of Jizos. Kannon Bosatsu, the goddess of mercy, comes in many different forms as well. And we'll talk about some of those. I just wanted to show you from my webpage just some of the forms of the 2 I've cataloged. So let's go to, yes.
So the Jesus, they don't have like a fancy ornaments and all that. So is there any reason behind? Because the viewers could be confused because we just learn about the rules and now you're saying some of the rules don't apply to some of the bodhisattvas.
There are exceptions to everything. There are exceptions to everything. But essentially, among the Bodhisattva and the Bosatsu class, with crowns, ornamentation, nice gowns, Jizo is the exception. But Jizo doesn't look like a Buddha. He doesn't have a lump of knowledge. He doesn't have a third eye. He only has the elongated ears. He wears a simple gown, holds a 6-ring staff, and a wish-granting jewel. The 6-ring staff symbolizes the 6 levels of karmic rebirth and suffering. Jizo could go to each of those 6 realms to save people. And so, yeah, I mean, just remember the Buddhas all have the spirally hair and the bump of knowledge, the third eye. Jizo might look to you like a Buddha, simple gown and bald head, but he doesn't have those other attributes. He again, is the only exception to the Bodhisattva.
Wonderful.
Most of them are princely, but Jizo is very earthly and down to earth. But in fact, Jizo means earth repository. Jizo means earth womb. And that might be something there. I'm not sure. That's a good question. I don't know the answer.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So we're talking now about the Kannon Bodhisattva, the goddess of mercy, or the god of mercy. She was feminized over the centuries, originally male. But if you look at artwork over the centuries, the male features of the face become more and more feminized. And like here, this looks very feminine to me. And this is the 1,000-arm Kannon. Look at all these arms. And each arm, on the hand of each arm is an eye, because the old stories were that the goddess of mercy, the Bodhisattva, tried to save everybody, but there was no way she could help everybody at the same time. So she blew up and fell into pieces. Oh, then she was recreated and given 1,000 arms with 1,000 eyes, so she could help more and more people with her hands and her eyes. She also has 11 heads, 1,000 arms and 11 heads. At the very, very top, the 11th head is Amida Buddha. We've already talked, because Kannon Bodhisattva is a helper or attendant to Amida. And the 10 heads represent the 10 levels of existence. So, I mean, you can see it's getting complicated now, but this particular form of Kannon Bodhisattva is very popular in Japan. A 1,000-armed Kannon with 1,000 eyes in each arm. And let me see, there are also 6 forms of Kannon that look after people in all of the 6 realms of karmic suffering and karmic rebirth. The other particular form of Kannon Bosatsu that's very popular is just a 2-armed version, but with the 11 heads. And here you can see again, at the very top of the crown is an image of Amida Nyorai, who she serves in the Pure Light School. But now, let's get confusing. This particular deity, Kannon Bosatsu, is linked very closely to one of the most popular sutras in all of Asia, which is the Lotus Sutra, in which this sutra describes Kannon Bodhisattva as appearing in 33 different manifestations. And here I've just given you a few. 3-headed manifestation, a bird-headed manifestation, a horse-headed manifestation, and a type of a wrathful manifestation. When you see these deities will all have different names, but they are all ways in which this particular Bodhisattva can manifest in the world to assist people in many different ways. So when you look at these, you would never think it was the 11-headed cannon or the 1,000-headed cannon. You look at these, who the heck are they? Took me a while to figure it out. We also have now in modern Japan, there's called the white-robed kannon. And here, very, very kind, feminine face. These are all big Buddha statues built all around Japan using this form of the goddess to pray for the war dead, for World War II, and to pray for the world peace as well. So we've already now, we are talking about just one Bodhisattva, but now we understand that she can come in dozens and dozens of different forms. Indeed, she can come in hundreds of different forms. You're always.
So when you see different deities that Kannon Bosatsu can transform or change her form to, they look like a Tenbu. We haven't talked about Tenbu. They don't look like a Kannon Bosatsu anymore. So is there any reason why behind that?
Well, that's another good question. Let's leave that question for the Tenbu section.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, so in any case, I wanted to mention that this particular Bodhisattva, the goddess of mercy, is popular throughout all of East Asia, but her two most popular forms are the 1,000-armed version and the 11-headed version, but she can then appear in many other different forms as well. This is where I actually fell in love with Buddhism. This is in Kyoto. It's the Sanjusan Gendo. And here we see the 1,000-armed kannon with 11 heads, surrounded by other 1,000-armed. There's apparently, reportedly, just 1,000 life-size statues of her with 1,000 arms. But at the Sanjusan Gendo, they couldn't carve 1,000 arms for all these statues, so they carved 42 arms, and each arm is supposed to represent 25 worlds, or let me see if that works out. 25 times 42 equals, she has 40 arms that represent 25 worlds, and then she has the regular two arms where she's praying, which also represent 25 worlds. So 42 arms times 25 equals 1,050. So I get confusing, but this is where I fell in love with Buddhist statuary. This Sanjusan Gendo temple in Kyoto, these statues were made by some of Japan's most lauded Buddhist sculptors like Tankei and Unke. And it's devoted to the 1,000-armed Kannon Bosatsu. Then again, I want to go back very quickly again to the 4 realms, the highest achievements, spiritual consciousness that we can achieve, and then the 6 realms of suffering and karmic rebirth. Once you're up here in the 4 realms, you can't fall back. You cannot fall back. You're always up here. I want to mention this because Jizo Bosatsu and Kannon Bosatsu each have 6 different forms. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When you go to Japan, if you go to Japan and you travel around, you will often find 6 Jizo statues at intersections, traffic intersections. You will also find them inside temples. You will also find them along hiking courses. Same thing with Kannon. You will find groupings of 6 Goddess of Mercy statues, which I'm showing a very famous grouping of 6 here. These are all modern. These 6 groupings of 6 represent the 6 realms of suffering and karmic rebirth. And they also represent the fact that Jizo Bosatsu, the bald-headed one, and Kanan Bosatsu, the goddess mercy, they appear in all 6 realms to help people in all 6 realms. So you have any questions about that?
No, I'm just intrigued. That's all.
And then here's a cartoon for children that I bought at a temple once. Here we have a form of Jizo Bosatsu. Remember, he's bald. He holds his wish-granting jewel. We don't see him here holding his staff, but over here we see him holding his 6-ring staff. He can shake his rings and move to each of the worlds in the 6 realms. Here we see him coming to hell, and he relieves the guardian, the fire stoker, the guy who throws, fuel onto the flames. He comes and relieves that guy so that the sufferers here in this boiling pot of water can at least have a little bit of, a free time to stop suffering. This particular Jizo is called Hitaki Jizo, the fire kindling Jizo. So he reduces.
What's the name of it? I think, I didn't hear that. What's the name of the Jizo?
Hitaki Jizo.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
The fire kindling. So he reduces the fires so that the suffering people can. Here is a really well-known story. Essentially, that in Japan, when you die, even children, how could they have no sin? If you're an aborted child, or you're a miscarried child, or a stillborn child, how could you have bad karma? Well, the idea is that you can have bad karma because you caused suffering to your parents. And so even small children, miscarried children, have to go to the underworld for judgment. And when they're there, they are told to pile stone upon stone, to pray for their parents, and also to climb out of this underworld judgment space. Well, along comes a red demon and starts knocking down their stones and starts terrorizing the children. The children run away. Oh, all of a sudden, who comes to save the children? Jizo Bosatsu with his 6-ring staff and his wish-granting jewel. And then the children find solace in his arms, as you can see here. But this particular story is widely known to most Japanese people born born by 1960s or 70s. Younger kids might not remember that story anymore. Here we see new forms of Jizo in Japan. Again, the bald head. Here we see the 6 Jizo to protect all 6 realms. But now, let's look at these over here. This is at a temple in Japan called Hase-dera in Kamakura. After World War II, there was just great destruction in the country. And many Japanese were unsure of the future. And there was a huge upswing in abortions. Parents after World War II didn't want to bring their children into an unknown future. They had no idea what the future would be. So by their late 50s and 60s, Japan had recovered. And a lot of these parents were suffering guilt and sadness and grief. And the temples adapted Jizo Bosatsu and Kanon Bosatsu to help grieving parents pray to their aborted, miscarried, stillborn children. And here what we see in some cases is parents would come to the temples for these musical Jizo and also musical Kanon, water child Jizo, water child Kanon. They would come to the temples, buy these little statues, and then dress the statues with some cloth from their dead child, in the hopes that Jizo would know who they were in the underworld and help that child in the underworld. Some parents would come, their child was sick, and they would pray to Jizo to make their child get well again. And if the child did recover and got well, they would come and they would maybe give toys to the little Jesus statues. Here we see like a Snoopy doll, and here we see some Walt Disney characters. Same thing with the Kanon. She also protects children who are undergoing judgment in the underworld. So this is a all new form of Jizo and of Kanon Bosatsu. Again, you can recognize Jizo, the bald head, very simple. Well, here they're, look at this. This is called the cutification. The Japanese temples find nothing wrong with taking older deities and then making them look like cartoons or animations. So here's another new adaptation of Jizo again. Bald head, 6-ring staff, wish-granting jewel, 6-ring staff, wish-granting jewel, bald head, symbol roof. Here we see grandma and grandpa down at the bottom. This particular Jizo is known as Boke Fuji. Kanon, I got the wrong, Boke Fuji Jizo, I got the wrong thing up there. It means Jizo who prevents dementia. Jizo who prevents Alzheimer. Wow. So grandma and grandpa don't want to, have Alzheimer. And so they want Jizo to help them avoid Alzheimer. So this is all new as well. This is like 1980s. The same thing with Kanon, the goddess of mercy. Here we see grandpa and grandma. And this is Boke Fuji Kanon, the senility, I call it the senility preventing Kanon Bosatsu. This temple actually sells pillowcases, which you can then take home and put on your pillow to prevent Alzheimer. So the marketing is just also very clever. So I'm actually working on a new report, a new project called New Duties for Old Deities. So these old Bodhisattva are now being used for all new functions in the world, right? So the world changes, so do the deities. And then finally, I'm going on too long here, but I don't know if I have time for it, but I just wanted to quickly show the level of complexity. Today we just learned about 6 of the most popular Bodhisattva. We focused on 2 of them. Now, if we just take this group of 6, here's how intensely complicated it becomes. Here's the 4th to 9th century in India. When people died, they had to go through the 7-day rites. And for 7 days, the dead soul would linger in a liminal state. Remember, they're going to be reincarnated either up or down the wheel, right? So they would wander for 7 times 7, 7 weeks, 7 days, 49 days. And on the 50th day, they would be reborn either up or down. Now, the Chinese took this idea and they combined it with their idea of 10 kings of hell, who, when you die, you have to go through 10 stages of judgment, and then you're reborn. The Japanese took this 7-7, 10 kings of hell, put it all together, and they came up with an idea of 13 kings of hell, in which most of the people we talked about already, Amida, Kanon Bosatsu, Yakushi Buddha, Niroku Bosatsu, Jizo Bosatsu, Fugen Bosatsu, Moju Bosatsu, Shaka Buddha. We haven't talked about Fudo yet. But these 10 of the most popular deities in Japan today are all linked to the 10 kings of hell of China. And the 10 kings of hell of China are all linked to the 7 sevens of India's karmic rebirth. And then it gets even fun, more fun. Those same deities, who we talk Kokuzo, Monju, Fugen, Seishi, Dainichi, Fudo, Amida, they're all linked to the zodiac. So some of them are, Kanan Bodhisattva, for example, is the protector of people born in the year of the rat. Jizo Bosatsu, is Jizo. Jizo didn't get into this list. That's very curious. I don't know why. But most of the deities I talked about today are patrons of the zodiac. Then we also have the 13 Buddhist deities, the Jusan Butsu, which in Japan, when you die, there's a set format for praying for the dead soul. And almost all the deities we talked about are Buddhas and are Bodhisattvas. And the next time we'll talk about the Myo. They're all included here. So we go from Fudo Myo to the historical Buddha, to Monju, who's on riding the lion, to Fugen, who's riding the elephant, to Jizo, the bald guy who helps children in purgatory, to Miroku, the future Buddha, to Yakushi, the medicine Buddha, to Kanen, Bosatsu, the goddess of mercy. Seishi, we didn't talk about, to Amida Buddha, Pure Land, to Ashuku and Dainichi and Kokuzo. We didn't talk about Ashuku either. These three are all part of the Shingo branch. You die, you go the first ceremony after death, the 7th day, 14th day, 21st day, 28th day, all the way out to the 33rd year. And these are the deities you pay, you pray to for post-mortem rites and rituals, and pre-mortem for the living as well. And so I'm just trying to show you how complicated it is, but it's the same group of deities. Here we have a pilgrimage to 13 Buddhist deities, the Jusan Butsu Jinrei. Did I say where it's at? I've forgotten. It's in here. So Yamato pilgrimage. When you go on these pilgrimages to 13 sites to pray for your deceased ancestors, at each temple you can get these wonderful stamps to show that you've visited each of the temples. And that's what's showing here. And you can buy a poster of all the 13s together. Now, of the 13, 8 of them are the protectors of the zodiac. So here we see Amida Buddha. Amida Buddha is the patron of people born in the year of the boar and the dog. And here we see Fudo Myo, people born in the year of the rooster. Here we see Dainichi Nyorai, people born in the year of the monkey and the lamb. Here we see, who do we see here? Seishi, horse. Here we see Fugen, snake and dragon. Monju, rabbit. Here we have Kokuzo, the tiger and the bull. And then Kanen Bosatsu with the rat. Okay, I'm going to be quiet down now. I'm going to give you a test, okay? Which photo is not a Buddha?
Buddha.
Which photo is?
Yeah, this is not Buddha. That Jizo is not Buddha, right?
Okay, that's right. See, curly hair, third eye. Look at this. This is modern day religious goods in modern commercial. Here's a Buddha booger candy.
Wow.
Hanakuso. These are cookies. Here is custard. Here's a Jizo who's now selling soap. Buddha cigarettes. These are candy cigarettes. Buddha beer.
Wow.
In Japan, in America, you could not use Jesus Christ to sell commercial products. But Japan is not so worried about such things. I find this very curious and very interesting. I just want to leave with a few photos of mine. Here are some, as I said, Jizo protects us as travelers, as pilgrims. You find his images, 6 images on intersections, hiking courses. Here is This is the hiking course of the wonderful little Jesus statue dressed in a red bib and a scarf by a lady who lives there. And here's a Jesus with funerary stones on a hiking course up in the hills here. And it's just to protect pilgrims and travelers, people in transition, right? The 6 realms, the wheel of life, those are 6 realms of transmigration, 6 realms of karmic rebirth. So people in transition. So Jizo is usually found on hiking trails and intersections because you're in transition going from one place to the next. Oh, one more here. I don't know this guy. Here's 13th century carvings of Jizo Bosatsu at the Hakone Pass, which again was another widely traveled road during the Kamakura period. So Jizo was very much a protector of people in motion, people in transit. And there are actually 6 Jizo here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I couldn't get the 6th one. And this, just to round it off, you can find all these topics on my homepage at OnMark Productions. Once you get there, all you need to do is click the button of the Buddha to go to the page.
Wow, that was actually the longest Carving the Divine TV that we ever had. But
how many? Oh, I'm sorry.
But it's good because we wanted to learn all the information. So in the end, I was wondering, maybe Bodhisattva, Bosatsu helps. They help more people than Buddha. I feel like I don't know what Buddha is doing, but Bodhisattva is all over the place and help people and stuff.
Well, so Bodhisattva, yes, that's very correct. The Buddhas are like up there just, looking down, but we can still pray to them for assistance and help. But the Bodhisattva are considered to be active people, active spirits, spiritual presence on earth that are closer to us, that are immediate and more immediate than the Buddha. And so that's why some of the most beloved deities, in my mind, some of the most beloved deities in East Asia are not the Buddha, they are the Bodhisattva, who are here on this earth trying to help us in all these different manifestations they can take. And in some cases too, in a statuary, you see that like Jizo Bosatsu will be shown stepping forward to show that he's a living presence, he's an active presence, he's walking in our time to assist us towards enlightenment. Whereas the Buddhists are mostly, so their feet are planted firmly together. Bodhisattva might have their feet apart to show that they're active here in this world. But I agree with that. That was a good observation.
Yeah, I learned a lot, and I hope you guys learned a lot too. So if you guys think this information is useful, make sure to subscribe my YouTube channel, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and like me on my Facebook, because that's how we do it in the 21st century, and Mr. Mark and I are doing it together. So thank you very much. So see you next time.
See you next time. Bye.